Ready?
I was going to say,
That's advanced. I think that's too fancy for what I want. You don't have to back up. You can just step up.
uh-oh.
Oh, no.
Thank you, choir. Welcome to the Unitarian Church of Los Alamos. My name is Elisa Enriquez. I go by she, her, and I am today's worship associate. Whoever you are, whomever you love, wherever you are on your life's journey, you are welcome here. If this is your first time with us, we'd like to get to know you. So please sign the guest sign-in book in the foyer and say hi to the greeter, our greeter, Mike McNaughton, or Rebecca Howard, who's the chair of the membership committee and also in the choir. To learn more about spiritual enrichment programs for all ages, please feel free to talk to Terra Louise, our director of Lifespan Spiritual Enrichment, and she'll also be talking later on in today's service. For kids at the service today, we have the activity table in the front and ask that kids please use your whisper voices when you're at the table. So please whisper. You can stay seated with your parents if you prefer, or you can even sit in the library with the parent. The library room is next to the AV room. We also have a nursery for young kiddos ages 0 to 3. Sarah Hamoud is our nursery coordinator and you can check in your young kiddos with her. After the time for all ages, kids are also invited to leave to go to their World Blessings class with Elizabeth Portrillos. Parents will need to sign out their kiddos from the class after the service. We have the Candles of Community area, both in the back and on my right. You're invited to come up during the first hymn or right now if you'd like, or any time before the prayer to light a candle. And if you'd wish to welcome, you're also welcome to write your joys and sorrows, which we have a book here, which will be read during the prayer time. If you're in need of pastoral care or spiritual counseling, please contact our minister, the Reverend Tina DeYo, who's gone this weekend, but she will be back with us next week. You can email her or call the church to set up an appointment. Please silence your cell phones this morning as we begin our worship service together. Oops. I went too far there. Before we go to the announcements, I wanted to make sure that everyone had a chance to greet each other. So you're now invited to greet your neighbor, and you're encouraged to greet somebody you don't know or maybe you don't recognize. You can also thank the musicians today, our choir, and also our AV persons. If you'd rather not shake hands, just say wave and hello. I'll call us back with a chime. Today, I'm really happy to be here with Stephen Ledoux, who is our guest speaker. He'll be speaking on the theme of consciousness. We come together as a community on Sunday to pause and connect together, to create connections within, among, and beyond us, calling us to live with wisdom and compassion, calling us to be our better selves. Now, let us light our flaming chalice, the symbol of our shared faith. And we have Ari, who's going to be coming up to light the chalice for us this morning. Thank you, Ari. Blessed is the fire that burns deep in the soul. It is the flame of the human spirit, touched into being by the mystery of life. It is the fire of reason, the fire of compassion, the fire of community, the fire of justice, the fire of faith. It is the fire of love burning deep in the human heart, the divine glow in every life.
Welcome to this science-based extended elevator speech on consciousness. People began discussing consciousness in ancient times, even before they began to write down records of their discussions. Up until recently, science had made few discoveries that related to these discussions. So, for millennia, these discussions remained informed primarily by subjective considerations and mostly theological, but some secular superstitions. We will not today go over that history. We will also not review all the discoveries, principles, and implications of the recent natural sciences that inform this topic. We will start by covering some general observations and then move on to some scientifically grounded realities, conclusions, and implications about consciousness. Many sermons from pulpits past and present have discoursed on the topic of consciousness. As wide-ranging as that coverage has been, it mostly shares a core that has, superstitiously, treated consciousness as a kind of primary cause of human behavior. Today we will explore some aspects of a more parsimonious, competing, alternative understanding of consciousness. An alternative derived from natural science, in particular the natural science of behavior, commonly known since 1987 as behaviorology, which is not to be confused with psychology. Perhaps you will find it surprising that we will start with part of the wisdom we receive from ancient sources. After all, in seeking to better understand the concept of consciousness, we are moving to better fulfill the ancient dictum of know thyself. We could begin by describing consciousness as the response of being aware and awareness of being. But consciousness turns out to be much more than merely an awareness of being. However, because we are sticking to science, we must set aside some related but superstitiously grounded abstractions, such as the one we traditionally call the mind, because they misinform consciousness. As a secularized version of the theological soul, the notion of mind has mainly helped hide the superstitions that so much burden the theological and secular views of the ancients and of so many of their more modern counterparts. Of course, along with setting mind aside, we also benefit from escaping some related superstitiously conjured notions like psyche, soul, self, personality, and so on. All of these label supposed and uncaused inner causes of human behavior. Inner causes that are fictitious causes. Traditionally, consciousness gets used the same way. It gets used as an uncaused, fictitious inner cause of behavior. However, as science uncovers more of the details of complex human behavior and its interactions with physiology, we find that the label consciousness covers far more interesting events. Rather than an uncaused cause of behavior, consciousness is a response, actually a combination of responses, all as outcomes of some other causes of behavior, causes discovered in the last 100 years. Thus, consider consciousness as a kind of complex behavior resulting from the interactions of these various causes with complex physiology. The result is seeing consciousness as a set of complicated, covert, neural-only behaviors that can and do affect other aspects of complex human behavior. How does that work? Let's start with a comment from a natural scientist whose name, B.S. Skinner, many of you recognize, but about whom too many people still have unwarranted misunderstandings. In his 1963 article, Behaviorism at 50, which I had the fun of updating in 2012, Skinner pointed out that the question of consciousness held a central role for the natural science analysis of behavior. Using the sense modality of vision for convenience, he started by describing consciousness as seeing that we are seeing, which we call conscious seeing. But he excised any mysterious implied inner agent who does the seeing by pointing out two general kinds of contingencies. Now, that term, contingencies, simply refers to the many discovered genetic or environmental independent variables that are in functional relations with the dependent variables of behavior, including human behavior. The occurrence of behavior is contingent on, that is dependent on, these independent variables. What are these two kinds of contingencies that Skinner mentions? One is our internal and external physical environments that supply the variables that condition seeing in the first place, called unconscious seeing, while our verbal community supplies the variables that condition both our conscious seeing, our observing, and our reporting of what is seen. These two, our physical environments and our verbal community, interact. The thing seen induces our initial unconscious seeing responses, and these in turn evoke the seeing reporting consciousness responses. Equally pertinent, when current independent variables are insufficient to compel the conscious parts to occur, they do not happen. For example, a hiker engaged in a conversation with a companion will step over an unconsciously seen football-sized rock on the trail. That is, the hiker responds to the rock by just stepping over it under what is called direct stimulus control, in which the stimulus energy traces, such as the photons reflected from the rock onto the hiker's retina and on into the hiker's nervous system, these stimulus energy traces move through the nervous system without engaging major brain parts, but simply setting off motor neurons that contract leg muscles that make a step over the rock. Later, however, the hiker cannot describe the rock because it was only unconsciously seen. If one is later to describe the rock, one must first consciously see it. That is, it must have induced certain additional kinds of responses to it. For example, thinking responses like, that stone has strange stripes. Then, some later prompts, perhaps involving a request for details about the stone. Some later prompt can evoke seeing it again, or re-seeing it, and then describing it. Actually, as in that example, the thing seen, the later rock, need not be present. Other real variables, like that request for details, can evoke the seeing response, that is, the re-seeing response, which can then evoke a reporting response. Consider for a moment that old gas-guzzling vehicle you have, or had, before getting your current hybrid or electric vehicle. You can observe and report to the person next to you the gas guzzler's make, model, and age. Go ahead, do so. Take a second. Mine was a big 1960s Chevy station wagon at about 8 miles a gallon. Because why can you do this? Because for most people, that kind of prompt evokes consciously seeing the mentioned vehicle, which is not present. All the involved responses, except the overt reporting, are covert, neural-only responses of consciousness. Furthermore, your covert reporting of the seeing is an example of the kind of consciousness behavior we call thinking, which is all covert behavior. When thinking occurs, which happens mostly, but not exclusively, as seeing or covert talking, it is not some kind of uncaused, spontaneous event. Rather, when thinking occurs, it happens as a real, natural, neural behavior event as a dependent variable effect of one or another real, natural event that functions as an independent variable. The sound wave energy traces from my speaking that gas guzzler prompt evoked your covert seeing and thinking responses, and possibly even your overt talking responses to your neighbor, which, if you remember it, you can tell them later if you didn't feel like doing it now. Such thinking responses represent a covert, common, and vital addition to the variables that control subsequent, especially overt behavior. As with all neural behavior, this consciousness behavior, this thinking behavior, can be difficult to separate from the neural physiology, the neuron bundles firings that mediate it. Still, as with all behavior, independent variables induce the occurrence of all neural behavior, including thinking or other consciousness responses. While all these events may be complex and occur so rapidly that they strain our measurement technology, causing us difficulty in keeping up, they are nevertheless occurring entirely naturally. They are not spontaneous events, and no inner agent of any sort is doing the seeing, observing, thinking, measuring, evaluating, reporting, or mediating. All of that so far only covers a couple of aspects of what we call consciousness. And while the seeing sense mode is convenient, all these aspects of consciousness apply to all our other sense modes as well. Also, consciousness seems tied to the presence of certain developed brain parts. Thus, some level of consciousness likely occurs in any organism that has any semblance of these brain parts. You have likely experienced the behavioral results with your cats and dogs. Consciousness stems from an extensive variety of conditioning experiences. Here, the word conditioning provides a simple way to talk about all the neuron firings and neural restructuring that physiologists see occurring when energy traces from stimuli set off sensory neurons. That is, stimulus energy traces always produce any neural impulses. Some of these impulses then induce and constitute chains of consciousness responses, while other impulses then induce the greater energy expenditures involved in bodily movements, such as the overt behaviors that we see as the neuromuscular responses, whose greater energy expenditures come from nutritionally derived bodily reserves. The consciousness responses of covert seeing, thinking, and reporting are just some of the kinds of consciousness responses that we can consider. They also exemplify the process of behaviors chaining together. In this chaining process, each behavior as an event, a natural, real event, serves a stimulus function of consequating the previous response, while at the same time also evoking the next response. The result is a fast-moving chain of responses, quite natural but difficult to track. Those cascading chains of sequential responses, though at times obscure, are not mysterious. Those cascading chains of consciousness responses involve the interface between physiology and behaviorology, enhancing our understanding of consciousness. Physiology addresses how behavior happens, including how consciousness happens, while behaviorology addresses why behavior happens, including why consciousness happens. Said another way, physiology addresses how skeletal muscle contractions occur, that is, as functions of neural processes that constitute the mediation of overt behavior, while behaviorology addresses why a body mediates behavior, that is, why those innervated muscle contractions occur, as functions of eliciting, evocative, or consequential stimulus energy traces. For example, behaviorology addresses the functional relations between independent variables such as, you can imagine this, a table blocking the path through a dining room, and the dependent variables of body-mediated behavior, such as the muscle contractions that the table evokes, thereby taking the body around the table. Such entirely natural events extend throughout the range of overt and covert behaviors during every human body's whole lifespan. A common neural chain of consciousness responses includes some speedy but identifiable parts that we can describe this way: raw sensation, awareness, recognition, comprehension, observation, and covert, then overt reporting. Here is a more thorough example that shows all those identifiable parts of raw sensation, awareness, recognition, comprehension, and so on. Picture an object passes by a foot or two from a person's face. The object's motion induces raw sensations, as light energy traces bounce off the object and strike the retina. These raw sensations evoke awareness responses that manifest as shifting spots of shape and color. These awareness responses then evoke the recognition responses of basically knowing from past conditioning that these properties, these shifting spots of shape and color, comprise a butterfly. These recognition responses may even include the covert or overt verbal behavior of saying butterfly. These recognition responses then also evoke comprehension responses that could involve any or all of the wider covert aspects of this body's behavior repertoire with respect to butterflies, if previously conditioned, such as, this is a monarch butterfly, a really big and beautiful one, the first one in the garden this season. And seeing one this early makes for wonderful feelings about the potential successes of pollination this season. Other comprehension responses could include additional poetic and scientific implications of the presence of monarch butterflies at that location, at that time of year, and so forth. Much of this consciousness chain we might also call parts of thinking and understanding and explaining. Also, other covert or overt stimuli could evoke overt verbal forms of these responses at any point during their covert occurrence. We can conceptualize the basic neural awareness, recognition, comprehension, behavior chain as seeing some object or event, that is awareness, knowing what it is, that is recognition, and understanding how it relates to other events, that is comprehension. We summarize such covert responding with the single term, consciousness. What we have covered today shows that natural science now, continually and increasingly, accounts for consciousness more reasonably than subjective philosophies or theological or secular superstitions. In conclusion, may this science-informed view of consciousness help reduce the superstitions still burdening our understanding of science and human behavior. May this improved understanding help us bring more justice and compassion to humanity, the biosphere, the future. I hope this inspires you.
As we contemplate today's message from Stephen Ledoux about what our consciousness, our inner self, or essence is, may we remember that love remains at the center. We extinguish this flame while keeping our own inner spirit, our being, alive. May we carry that inner fire of love for ourselves and for each other throughout our lives. We will finish the service with the way. You may hold hands if you choose while respecting each other's space if you need to and for comfort. Please stay to join us for the potluck. There's plenty of food for all.